Why do you lose the room the moment you start speaking? You can say the right things, hold the right position, and still disappear in plain sight. Because two people can say the exact same sentence, and one is heard while the other is just sound. Not louder, not more expressive, not more polished, just undeniable. So what is the difference? The Greeks had a word for it, charis, grace. Not something you build, something that appears, as if it were given rather than constructed. Which sounds poetic, but it explains nothing, because charisma doesn't feel random, it feels precise. And whatever it is, it's not skill, it's not intelligence, it's not even confidence in the way we usually think about it. It's coherence. Most people are divided. There is what they feel, what they think, and what they show, and those layers don't align. So when they speak, part of them is expressing, and another part is adjusting, correcting, filtering, monitoring how it lands. You can feel that, even if you can't explain it, because something in you is reading the signal, and the signal is unstable. This is where Carl Jung becomes precise. Jung believed the self is not singular, it is structured. There is the persona, the social identity, your name, your role, the version of you that functions in the world. And beneath it, there is something older. Jung called it the archetypes. Not personalities, not moods, but patterns. The king, the warrior, the lover, the sage. These are not ideas you learn. They are forms you recognize. Most people live at the level of persona. They refine it, polish it, adjust it to fit. But the persona is sin. It is reactive. It changes depending on who is watching. Charisma begins the moment something deeper takes over. When expression is no longer shaped by the room, but driven by something more stable. When a person speaks with real authority, you're not reacting to their personality. You're reacting to the archetype they're embodying. They're not confident. They're momentarily undivided. That's why it feels magnetic, because you're not just seeing a person, you're recognizing something older than them. Jung had a word for this process. He called it individuation. Not self-improvement, not becoming better, but becoming whole. The integration of opposites. The acceptance of what you show and what you hide. The alignment of what you feel and what you express. Charisma is not created by adding traits. It appears when there is nothing left to compensate for. Which brings us back to the signal. When there is no internal contradiction, expression becomes clean. There is no delay between impulse and action, no gap between thought and voice, no second layer correcting the first. And that creates something rare, a stable signal. This is why charisma feels irrational, because your mind doesn't detect it first, your body does. Which is exactly what Max Weber identified. Weber described charisma as a form of authority that does not require proof. It doesn't justify itself. It is accepted before it is understood. People don't follow charisma because it convinces them. They follow it because it feels real. Not impressive, not dominant, real. And reality, when it is undivided, has weight. You can't scroll past it easily. You can't dismiss it quickly. You can't ignore it completely. It stays. Modern psychology tries to reduce charisma to components: power, warmth, presence. But these are not techniques, they are consequences. Power is not aggression. It is the sense that a person can affect reality. Warmth is not friendliness. It is the sense that they won't use that power against you. And presence is what makes both believable. Without presence, power feels threatening. Without presence, warmth is performative. Presence is a stabilizer, and stability is what the nervous system trusts. This is where the modern world creates friction. We have built a culture that optimizes expression. How you speak, how you appear, how you position yourself. But we have almost completely ignored coherence. We train the persona, but we leave the self unresolved. So people become better at presenting. and weaker at being. And the more refined the presentation becomes, the more noticeable the gap feels. This is why charisma feels rarer now. Not because people lost it, but because the vision increased. More layers, more awareness, more self-monitoring. You're no longer just speaking. You're watching yourself speak, adjusting mid-sentence, filtering mid-thought, optimizing mid-expression. And every layer of optimization reduces signal strength. And at a certain point, something flips. You're no longer expressing yourself. You're managing yourself. Every word becomes a calculation. Every pause becomes a strategy. Every reaction becomes something to control. You're no longer in the moment. You're outside of it, observing, correcting, adjusting in real time. And that split is where charisma disappears, because presence cannot survive self-surveillance. The moment you watch yourself exist, the self exist, you divide the signal. And divided signals don't land, they scatter. Because coherence requires something most people avoid: silence. Not external silence, internal silence. The absence of correction, the absence of performance, the absence of trying to land. That is where presence begins. And presence is what creates density. In a world of fragmented attention, a person who is fully there feels heavier than everything else. People drift toward that because it feels more real than their own day. But this is also where the danger begins, this analysis. It lands before it is questioned. It creates trust without evidence, authority without verification. That's why it can lead and mislead. Feels real enough, people stop checking if it's true. History is full of this. Figures who carried absolute conviction and transmitted it so cleanly that others followed without resistance. Not because they were right, but because they were undivided. That's the paradox, powerful. And power reveals what is already there. Which is why the real shift is not external, it is internal. The future will not belong to those who are more visible, more expressive, more optimized. It will belong to those who are less divided. The ones who can hold a position without negotiating it mid-expression. The ones who can speak without listening to themselves speak. The ones who can be seen without modifying what is there. That is what reads as real. And reality, when it is coherent, cuts through everything. And you already know where this happens. Not in theory, in moments, when you hesitate, even thought you know exactly what you want to say. When you adjust your tone, not because it feels right, but because it might land better. When you feel the impulse and then immediately edit it. That gap, that fraction of a second between what is true and what is shown, that is where the signal breaks. And most people live inside that gap, so consistently that they no longer notice it. So the question is no longer, how do I become charismatic while trying to appear whole? Because that's where the signal breaks. Charisma was never something you had. It was something that appeared when nothing in you was competing. And in a world of constant performance, that might become the rarest advantage of all. This is part of the TOMAAS prophecies, cinematic essays that don't just reflect the world, but read between its fractures through layered visuals and emotional pattern recognition. Art isn't decoration, it's intel. It translates what we haven't yet learned to name, because by the time everyone understands the shift, it already happened. If something has stayed with you, leave a thought that triggered even one sentence. And if these reflections resonated, subscribe for the next prophecy, because in a glitched world, decoding is the only way to stay oriented. If you're drawn to the visual work behind these ideas, you can explore more of my digital artworks and original photography at TOMAAS.com.